Hello students, welcome in another e-learning lesson. This is a lesson that kicks off our Unit 3, which leads us from where we left off at the end of the War of 1812 all the way up to the precipice of Civil War. All right, and this is a unit where the themes are about America growing, about democracy growing, but also about the country kind of cracking or fracturing. All right, and there's some beautiful parts of this in this unit, some exciting parts, and there's just a lot of tragedy in this as well. This has a kind of a sorrowful tone in certain ways that I'm looking forward to walking through with you. So some of the images on here might be things where you would say, oh, I know who that is, or I know what that's about, or they might be mysteries for you. That's fine. We'll get to explore this together along the way. Our lesson today is just kind of setting up the stage, talking about some new changes, all right, some new developments in this second chapter of American history. Once the founding is, more or less that chapter, that age is coming to an end, we see the project of democracy continuing to expand, but also the country, really starting to drift and move in some different directions. That's what we're going to explore here. So our learning targets, I can assess the effects of expanding democracy. What effects does that have? And I can trace the path towards civil war. Guys, that is our long-term learning target through all of Unit 3. We are tracing the path towards civil war, toward that catastrophe that's sitting there in the middle of the 19th century, and we're going to have to deal with it. We're going to sort of trace the path that leads up to it. It's not a simple thing, but we'll already start seeing all that foreshadowing here in this lesson here. So let's begin. If we're talking about changes happening in the country in the first couple decades of the 19th century, I'd say there were some changes that were prophesied and that the founders would have been excited about, right? Like Alexander Hamilton would have welcomed every element of the Industrial Revolution that's starting to take place in big chunks of the country. And that's that idea of interconnectedness and increasing markets and production. That's all good stuff, right? That's something that was sort of set in motion already. But at the same time, there's interesting questions of who exactly should be part of this political system that we have? And is there room for more, right? Is there room for more people? Or what happens when different parts of the country start to, not walk in step with each other, but really increasingly start to move in different and more diverging directions? What happens, right? We'll watch this process play out. Democracy. Look, guys, we said that the founders and democracy, they like it fine. Popular sovereignty is a part of the Constitution. Like in the end, the buck stops with the people. The people have the power. But there's many elements or ways in which the founders also said, maybe let's take the keys from the public. Maybe let's keep the public a little bit sheltered, right? We built the Senate this way for a reason. They built the Electoral College a certain way for a reason, but as time passes, guys, Americans just became more and more comfortable with the idea that this country, that more people should be allowed to participate in the political process, and that their voice should be heard more frequently. It's like a theme we'll see in this course. It's actually a lovely part of our course as we study the American story, our American inheritance. It's just how every now and again we kind of we're having our, we're having our party here in this room, and then we sort of open up the door and we invite in a different group of folks, right? We say, you know what, you should be in on this as well. And what's happening in the early 19th century is that states are getting away from the idea that voting and citizenship and political participation is really something for the fancy few, right? For the educated, for the elite, and that it's really something that everybody, or at least all white males, should be able to participate in, whether they're educated or not, whether they're wealthy or not, right? And so more and more states start getting rid of these laws that say you need to be a property holder in order to vote. Because that sort of meant you are a landowner, you're a farmer, you're of that sort of Jeffersonian tradition of you're a rugged, self-sufficient farmer, and maybe the poor riffraff we don't let vote. But they're saying now the attitude it was just a change in attitude. The attitude is becoming, no, they should be able to participate too, right? They should be able to participate just like wealthy people should, all right? And again, African Americans are not invited into the party at this point. Women are not invited into the party at this point. Those will come, all right? Those will come. Again, this sort of process will be repeated a lot. But politics just became more democratic in the sense that politicians were learning to aim for the common folks. All right, the regular folks, the people of Walmart, as you were, at least in the early 19th century version of whatever that would be. And I'll show you evidence of this here, like expansion of voting rights. In 1800, right, a lot of the green areas means that there is still property qualifications there, meaning you could vote if you held property, right, if you were a person who owned land and you were at least a modest farmer. By 1830, there's not many of those places left that required you to own land, and more places just say you pay some taxes, right, which means you make some income. By the way, that's also changing because the Industrial Revolution meant that there were people who were, becoming middle class who might not own much land, right? They might just be wage earners. So especially in the northern states, it was just a sensible thing to just say, we're not tying the vote to any sort of land ownership, because lots of people might not own much land or any land at all, and they're middle class, right, because of our industrial system. So the system is just opening up to more poor white folks. All right, that will change our politics, I promise you, because politicians learn to aim. There's a lot of poor white folks, all right, especially a politician like this guy. You might know something about Andrew Jackson, and if you don't, just wait till lesson 3.2. We're going to explore that, but he's going to, if this is a wave of new types of voters coming in, he's the guy on the surfboard riding this wave, this sort of new populist wave, this new populist style of American politics. Andrew Jackson will be leading that charge. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. As the country is growing, and you can see, by the way, literally, it was growing. States were being added. People, right away, back in the 1790s, we're already kind of pouring over the Appalachian Mountains into the Ohio River Valley region, right? And into the western southern states like Kentucky. And by this point, by 1820, we've reached the Mississippi. All right, states like Mississippi and Louisiana have already gotten all the way out to that land that was gained at the end of the Revolutionary War. But the areas in green, the northern states, not always called the northern states at an early stage of American history. Sometimes they were called the eastern states, but we're going to eventually call them the northern states, and those states in orange, whatever color you'd call that, the southern states, the states in tangerine, are starting to just really move in different directions. And of course, we know slavery has a lot to do with that, but that's not necessarily where the differences originated, all right? Northern states were industrializing. This is a natural economic process that had begun in Great Britain, and lots of other places were beginning this industrialization process by which no longer is all the labor being done by people and animals in a traditional farming setting, but now it's being done by people plus machines, and not in a farming setting, but in a factory setting. And in the North, there's a lot of kind of factors that are helping that along. There's a lot of rivers, right? And rivers were used to propel these machines, literally give energy for these machines in early factories. And so there's just kind of like these rivers and waterways made sense to move goods and to move the goods around, but also to power these mills and these early textiles factories. The North has a lot of labor. Now that's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy, but as immigrants, from Ireland and the Scotch-Irish and German immigrants are arriving, they go primarily to the northern states where there is factory work available, right? They follow the jobs. Down south, where a lot of the land is spoken for by wealthier landowners, the economic prospects just aren't as good. And so as these northern states in green are industrializing, in an industrial system, slavery doesn't make a lot of economic sense, right? It's cheaper for a factory owner to just pay wage labor to an immigrant than it is to purchase a slave. And so slavery became less and less frequently seen, and as it was less and less frequently seen, it was seen more and more as anathema, or just as strange, or just flat out wrong. There developed a moral sense that it was wrong to do that, right? And so it's not like Northerners said, because slavery is wrong, we will industrialize. But it's more like as Northerners industrialized, they increasingly began to see slavery as wrong and not part of their way of life. However, in the South, things are going to follow a very, very different path. Right? We're going to study later in this unit how the founders believed that slavery was going to naturally die out, sort of wither and peter out on its own. And when they were thinking about this in the 1780s, let's say 1790s, there's plenty of evidence to support that position. That changed, sadly, tragically, with the invention of the cotton gin. The cotton gin is a lovely, nifty invention. Invented by Eli Whitney. Thank you. All right, a good inventor who invented a nifty product. The idea of a cotton gin is you can put raw cotton in there, all right, cotton right off the stem, and you turn this crank, and this cotton gin will sort of remove the little ugly black seeds from the tufts of cotton itself. And that was work that before you used to have to just have rooms full of slaves sitting there by hand picking all these black seeds out, and it's slow and it's tedious and whatever. And it basically meant that it was just more expensive to produce cotton. Now you put one guy behind this machine, turn the crank, and it does all that work, and it does it much faster and much more simple. And it means that cotton has suddenly become a much more profitable commodity. That's beautiful. Eli Whitney, in his process, Eli Whitney is thinking, I'm going to make life easier for slaves so they don't have to do this anymore. Sadly, this has sort of the exact opposite effect. Because slavery is now much less expensive to produce, and because slavery is a manifestly awesome product, I just want to note that. I'm sorry, I misspoke badly. Because cotton is such a manifestly awesome product. Slavery is manifestly terrible and awful and immoral, but cotton is beautiful, right? I'm wearing cotton right now. I promise, wherever you are, students, you are wearing cotton on you because it's versatile and it breathes nicely. It's a beautiful fabric. I don't need to convince people why you should like cotton. Right? Now we can produce cotton much more efficiently and cheaply, which means our profit margins just went boom. Which means down south there is so much more incentive to now grow cotton. And so slavery had begun to sort of naturally taper off, but suddenly there is this cotton boom, right? Suddenly it is so much more economical and profitable to produce cotton that there is this doubling, tripling, quadrupling down on the old style plantation economy, because now we're gonna grow cotton. And now the South, as opposed to drifting away from slavery and toward industry, it's like every economic incentive instead is to go toward slavery. And so you have these two parts of the country moving in different directions. And we have this interesting moment, and this is the last idea for this lesson. We have this interesting, awful, ominous moment. It's like a foreshadowing moment. It's like thunder rolling in the distance, and you get some sense of like, oh, there's a storm coming. And that happens in 1819, all right? And this is this whole mini crisis that we call today the Missouri Compromise. Let me tell you the story briefly, all right? The nation is expanding rapidly. All kinds of immigrants are pouring in. All right, down south, the production of cotton meant there's every kind of impulse to expand further west and keep growing cotton. Right, and so more and more states are coming online. They have enough people. They meet the requirements for statehood, and they're entering the Union. In 1819, Missouri requests to join the Union, to join the United States. And in Missouri, slavery was practiced, not as intensely and not in maybe the same ratio that it happened in like a place like South Carolina or something like that, but slavery was practiced. And when Missouri requests to enter the Union, that creates a crisis in the national government. The national government like receives this petition for statehood, and they go, okay, well, here's the thing, right? We've had for a long time, whatever it is, 10 or 11 free states, 10 or 11 slave states. It's been equal, right? And it's been equal in the Senate. You remember in the Senate, all representation is equal. All states get 2 senators. And so if we bring in a slave state without bringing in a free state to balance it, that means that the interests of slavery will have an advantage in the Senate, right? They will have leverage over the free states of the North. And that's concerning. And beyond that, it's just starting to come into focus for many Northerners. Slavery is not receding into the horizon. It's not disappearing. It's it's growing, right? It's expanding. It's not withering. And as Northerners are Northern consciousness is increasingly, it certainly is not racially enlightened at all. I'll teach you that. But this consciousness is developing that slavery is wrong and immoral. And now we see the slavery on the march and on the expanse west. That's like trouble. And so a lot of Northerners and Northern senators are saying, hold on. I'm not sure I like this. I'm not sure I like this. And for many Southerners, they're saying, well, why don't you like it, right? What's the issue you have, right? Southerners are making a lot of money on the cotton boom, right? And so when Northerners are like, well, you see, it's slavery's on the expanse, Southerners were sort of feeling like their whole way of life is being threatened. And so now we're not just talking Missouri, now we're talking slavery. And now everybody's, now it's like the carpet's on fire, like the things are really escalating. And how are we going to resolve this? How are we going to figure out a way to move through this? And here we meet a figure named Henry Clay. Henry Clay is a major figure in the United States Congress in the first half of the 19th century. All right, he is a major political figure. He's as major a figure in the first half of the 19th century as maybe Andrew Jackson, though Clay was never president. All right, Clay is on the stage, the national stage, for a long time. Clay is from Kentucky, all right? So he's kind of a Westerner, and Kentucky's like in the border region between the North and the South, and Clay is a broker, right? He can sort of broker between the different regions, and he is essentially a deal maker. Our constitutional system needs people like him to make it work, and he's pretty effective, all right? And he gets this nickname of the Great Compromiser. He's going to have to figure out a way, what are we going to do about this Missouri thing, man? Because now we're all hollering about slavery. And so Henry Clay... And he brokers this deal, this compromise that says, okay, so here's how we're going to keep us from all killing each other right now and hollering about slavery. And here's a way that we can maybe get forward. They say we're going to admit Missouri as a slave state. And free states, northern states, before you go berserk, hold on a second. We came up with a creative solution. We kind of invented a new free state, all right? The Northern District of Massachusetts, this sort of like non-contiguous chunk of land that had been part of Massachusetts, we're going to make it its own state, and we're going to call it Maine. All right. So the state of Maine separates from Massachusetts and becomes its own state as a way to be a free state entering the Union at the same time as a slave state of Missouri. And now we can say to everybody calm down and sit down in the Senate. There will still be a balance between them. And moving forward, we have all this new land as a result of the Louisiana Purchase. Thank you to Thomas Jefferson and all that stuff. What we're going to do is we've negotiated a magic line, all right? This Missouri Compromise line, and we're going to draw this magic line across North America, and everything that sort of comes in north of that line, we can talk about that being free territory. Everything that comes in south of that line, future states will be slave territory. So that'll give us like the contours and the way that we can talk about this without having to put each other's hands around each other's throats the next time the question of a new state entering the Union comes in. And as best we can, we got to keep that incremental balance between them so that no one side is able to get leverage and then everyone freaks out, right? In essence, Clay's deal kind of puts the old normal back together, and it gives us this magic line and says, here's how we're going to move ahead. Can we all kind of holster our weapons again? And now we don't have to argue about slavery, and we can get back to the regular business of governing. And everyone's kind of like, okay, but that thunder has rumbled in the distance of blah, blah, where it would say to people who are paying attention, like, man, I think that escalated quickly. I'm not sure what to think of that, right? People are seeing this issue could really go haywire. So we got to meet Henry Clay. We got to talk about the America moving in different directions, about expanding democracy, all right? All I need you to do now, students, is to start up on that Unit 3 slideshow project, and I want you to work on the Missouri Compromise slide, all right? And we will continue to interact with Henry Clay and learn more about him and the 4 times he ran for president and failed all 4 times. He had a wonderful career, except in that regard. So we'll learn all about that. And I look forward to teaching you about Andrew Jackson next time we meet. So until then, guys, good luck on that slideshow page, and have a great Monday. See ya.